But see, in the end, the thing was the consequences of that going poorly were a lot lower than the consequences of me coming out to you going poorly. I liked my life a lot and wanted to keep it that way.
Hello, and welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm Heidi. I'm a couples therapist and relationship coach specializing in mixed orientation marriages and mixed gender identity relationships. Whether you're just discovering this reality or you've been on this journey for a long time, this is the space where your marriage matters, your values matter, and your choices matter. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm so excited because I'm here again with my husband, Daniel, today. So it's a Daniel episode, and those are my favorite. And I think a lot of people really appreciate them. So Daniel, thanks for being here again.
You're welcome.
So today we've decided to talk about what it was like coming out a little bit more. And we mentioned last time that you came out to your best friend first. And so we're just going to talk about what that's been like in our relationship, how we've navigated that, maybe some of the difficulties. And as we talk, I'm thinking of three groups of people today. I'm thinking of the people who maybe haven't decided if they think it's a good idea to tell their spouse that they experience same-sex attraction. I'm thinking of spouses in my situation where maybe a husband has confided in someone else before them. And then I'm also thinking of the people in your situation who maybe have told, and yet it's difficult for them to articulate to someone else and what it's like through that experience. So those are the people I'm thinking about. I think a good starting place today would be understanding better how you made that choice to tell or not to tell, what went on for you as you were navigating this in your head before you had told anyone.
You know, I think that this may be evolving a little bit as society changes, but in my generation and many earlier, the idea of telling anyone that someone experienced same-sex attraction was really scary. And I don't imagine that most people had no intent of ever saying anything to anyone. I think oftentimes this is a fact of life that people would love to take to their grave as a secret instead of talk about. And although I think that's evolving, I think that will still be a thing in the current day. And my take on that is that even though it's become more acceptable in our society today, no one likes to be the odd man out. You know, I mean, maybe occasionally some people like the uniqueness of it, but like more often than not, like people don't like being unique individual, I think, in the room. So I think it'll always be hard. I think that was true, you know, for sure when I was younger. And honestly, like I didn't have any intentions of telling anyone ever. I mean, at first I didn't even want to tell myself, right? And I think for a long time, like I wouldn't even accept the fact that this was a real thing for me. I think for the longest time, I assumed that it would just go away, right? Or that it was just some sort of admiration. You know, I think when I was younger and started noticing it, like I assumed it wasn't that like I was attracted to these other guys. Like I just wanted to be more like them. You know, I just wanted hair like theirs, or, you know, I just want to, you know, to mature and grow up like them, you know? And so I think that I wasn't even willing to tell myself, I don't think originally, and I definitely had no intentions of telling anyone.
So when did that change? Oh, we talked about that last time. We talked last time about how you kind of got to a point where you were worried that you might, like, essentially you might face some temptations, and that essentially you needed someone to be able to talk to face this less alone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I think also, and I mentioned this last time too, but I think when things are secretive, they have a tendency to grow and become bigger. And I think this was one of those things in my life that wasn't receiving the attention that it required or needed. And so it did grow. It became more of a presence in my mind and in my thoughts and things like that.
Do you think you put that together after you disclosed? Meaning that it was growing in darkness? Because did you realize that and that
No.
it needed to be brought to the light, or was that
like
post?
I think that's in retrospect when I look back and see how things changed after I opened up about it, that I recognized that it was kind of taking on a life of its own, and it didn't didn't need to be right. And it was taking on life of its own, meaning that it wasn't like, it wasn't guided. Like I wasn't making decisions necessarily on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just
Mm-hmm.
kind of, it was,
Internally.
yeah, and it was kind of taking over in many ways. But I really have a strong belief that, we get to, when we leave life by intention, we get better outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, nothing was being done intentionally, right? It was all trying to be ignored and suppressed
Mm-hmm.
and hidden.
Mm-hmm. And so, let's kind of fast forward then, because we know why you decided to tell your best friend. But then fast forward to when you decided to tell me, and that was about 4 years later, to put things in context. What brought that decision on?
Well, I think I still at that point, or up until that point, really had no intentions of telling really anyone else, but I had started experiencing the benefits of being more open about it. I would say that my time period of those 4 years was life changing for me because I went from something that was really scary and shameful to where I think I accepted it and made peace
Mm-hmm.
with it. Um, I wasn't necessarily ashamed of it at all, like anymore. I mean, it was something that I think if you would have asked me about if I would want it to go away or if someone had a magical wand, they could take it away from me, like would I? And I think during that time period, I recognized that I wouldn't, that it wouldn't be something that I would step away from just because I didn't know what parts of me were connected to, right? And I liked me. And so I, I think I grew in many ways and it felt a lot better during that time period. But because of that, I think the shame about it went down
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a lot, right? And so the idea of sharing it with more people became more palatable to me because it didn't seem as scary anymore
Mm-hmm.
to me. And I also seen that it was something that I understood a lot more about it. And obviously that's part of, the shame going away too. And I told a couple other friends too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I originally had told my best friend, I assumed that that was it, that he was the one person that got to know and then the two of us would take that to our grave.
Mm-hmm.
But because I had started talking to a few other friends for various reasons and at times of need, then it wasn't such an exclusive group anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think at that point, I also did have to make a decision. It's like, okay, well, this has gotten, even though only I think 3 or 4 people knew,
Mm-hmm.
like at that point, it did get to a point where I'm like, okay, this isn't a secret anymore. And it probably shouldn't be a secret from you.
Mm-hmm. I thought of a lot of questions when you were talking, and now I have to think of what they were.
Why don't you think about it? And let me talk a little bit more. What kind of led to me
Okay.
ultimately telling
Okay.
you? Like at the
That's
end,
good. I was
does
going
that
to cut
work?
that part, but I won't anymore. Okay, go ahead.
Because I think, so we got to the end of that, there's a 4 year period. And I don't think I talked about this last time, but I had another friend that I had told,
Mm-hmm.
right? He had confided in me some of the struggles that he had had in life. And I hadn't been, like, I tried to relate,
Mm-hmm.
but it was in this half truth way,
Like a
right?
semi-hidden.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because pornography had been a challenge and a serious problem for him, and that had been something that at times had been a struggle for me. And so I tried to relate with him on this, but yet it just seemed that he had been really honest with me, and I felt that I had been only kind of honest with him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was like, if he's willing to be so open and trusting to me,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed wrong that I was only willing to give him half truths
Mm-hmm.
because although the experience may have been similar, the object of that, unchecked lust and stuff was different.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I came out to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe now when I look at it that he was inspired, right? Because here I felt that I had really done a lot of work and was in a great spot. And I think oftentimes we do, right? We think that
Mm-hmm.
we have it figured out, we're
We're
fine.
evolved now.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
evolved, everything's good,
Mm-hmm.
there's no more work to be done. And I think I was somewhat to that phase where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm good. I got this figured out. Life's fine. And it was way better,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't I don't think it was really fine. I think if you think about it, the fact that I still hadn't talked to very many people about it, wasn't willing to talk to very many people about it, there was still a fair amount of shame and
Right.
suppression that was like,
Right.
all tied
Right.
into it. And and I think this friend saw that,
Hmm.
right? And his experience too in his life was until he had really brought all of his struggles out into the full light, he wasn't able to heal
Hmm.
and move on, right? Although our circumstances and experiences were different. I mean, he had a really strong testimony of transparency and like openness. And I think in his experience, like having his wife be fully involved in
Hmm.
what he was struggling with was really, really helpful.
Right.
And so he was incredibly encouraging of me to talk to you. And it was, and I can't even tell you why or what happened, but when he started pushing on it and
Mm-hmm.
telling me that I should tell you, like, I just knew he was right.
Hmm.
It just felt like he was speaking truth. And that was really hard
Hmm. Hmm.
for me because I
For sure.
didn't want that. I didn't want that truth.
Yeah. I remember him saying to you, if I remember the words that you told me right, he said something along the lines of, Daniel, there's potential you're not reaching because you're not sharing this with your wife.
Yeah, he definitely felt that I was being held back.
Hmm. And I really appreciated that.
And
There's,
I think that potential too was pretty widespread when I think about it, like, because I think a lot of people might hear that and be like, well, what potential is this? Like
mm,
potential in like, spiritual development? Is it like church development? Is it personal in life? Like, where is it? And I actually think that when we are holding back and hiding in shame, I think kind of your just general potential across the board
mm-hmm,
can be limited.
mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if he thought that, broadly about it. Maybe he had,
Right. I don't know
but
either. Again, I do feel like that was an inspired direction that he was offering. And I think of what our oldest daughter, when you came out, like kind of that year or two after what she said about it, which I love so much. But
because
she,
this was her in retrospect looking back at that year because she
yes,
didn't know either the first time,
that's right.
right? So
So,
after I came out to you,
after
and then I
you,
told her about a
and then
year
you told
later.
her, and then after she had known for about a year or two, she said to me something along the lines of how you coming out was like when the Wizard of Oz goes to from black and white to color.
Hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that so much. It's such a sweet picture. And I think I fully agree. Like you embracing all the parts of you and bringing them forward was such a gift to all of us to address the shame, to figure out where this fit in your life. It really was a gift to all of us. I have a thought as I'm listening to you, and as we were discussing before we started recording, that I think is really important for spouses because I think listening to that, it's easy for me as a spouse to hear it and see kind of, I'm going to say the lack of consideration for me. Like I'm kind of absent from that whole picture. And actually, retrospectively, when I think about that, I want to know your thoughts on this, if you agree, if you disagree. I think that kind of actually was our marriage in some ways. Like you were wrapped up in a lot of things during that time. There were priorities of work and hobbies and friends. Eventually, I think that shifted, but I can actually see how there was less of a presence for me that I felt then than what I feel now. I'm curious if you noticed that too, or if I'm out in the night actually, or up in the night, I think is the phrase. I get those wrong all the time, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot to like I think unpack there. It's a long pause you're gonna have to take out.
It's okay. Can I rephrase my question a little bit? It's
Yeah.
not that I think I was completely absent. I actually think to some degree, the way we were functioning in that time period was I was someone to be taken care of. And so there was like a protectiveness. And I'm not saying you were keeping this from me to protect me necessarily. I'm just saying the dynamic that we had set up was less, was, I wasn't as pleasant to be with because I was kind of more demanding. You were trying so hard to please me. We were in a system of functioning where you were working to please me a lot. And I actually think we abandoned that and I started to matter more.
Hmm. I do, and it's hard to pull all these pieces apart and decide what is related to my journey and experience with same-sex
Right.
attraction and what was just related to our journey as a couple
Right.
as we worked through and developed things. Where so let me pull, I think, a couple pieces that we can pull out of this, and I think create some clarity because I think one of the questions that we need to address is why I chose or didn't choose to tell you early on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it's really interesting when you fast forward and you described really well, I think, where we evolved to.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that the topics that we've had as we've discussed this, or I guess one of the comments I have is that, and this may be hard, I think, for a lot of people to hear, and I think it has been hard, but I I don't feel bad that I didn't tell you earlier.
Right.
And I think that's been kind of a hard thing for you. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about how that was for you. But before I step into that, like I think one of the reasons why I don't feel bad is because when I look back at that time period and I think of who was maybe hurt the worst or how you were hurt, I think the way that you and the family were hurt is that because I had kept all these things quiet and I was hiding, I wasn't able to be my best me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually wasn't capable of showing up in a way that would lead to a better relationship with you. I wasn't able to show up in a way that allowed me to be the best dad I could be. And so I think where you and the kids were hurt is that I was lesser than I should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I started understanding who I was and exploring all of that, I was able to become a better person in many
Mm-hmm.
ways, like move into that, to the color time period of my life from the darkness
Mm-hmm.
where I was previously. And so when I look at it, I think that's what evolved for us too, is that I evolved. Now, obviously, you were growing and learning at the same time too. So, I mean, we were both progressing and
Right.
learning to where you could get to a better spot. But I think that's where I hurt you all the
Mm-hmm.
worst.
Right. Right. I think I would agree. And I think what you said early on about disentangling what's connected to same sex attraction and what's just relational, I think I am speaking to that relational component, actually, not the SSA. It was just a very typical framework that I see most couples built on early on. And that shifted for us over these periods of
Mm-hmm.
growth. And so when I see my absence in that picture, like that's kind of how I'm making sense of it. Things shifted. It's not that you didn't care about me. I actually think you cared deeply about me and you cared what I thought and you cared how I felt and you worked really hard to take care of our family and
Mm-hmm.
provide for our family. But emotionally, that connection was very different than it is now.
Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, when I look back to that time period, like after I had talked to my best friend about this, the love that I felt for you increased. Like I actually felt closer to you during that time period. And I think, again, I think that was because I had a greater capacity for love,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even because I was able to love myself more
Mm-hmm.
than I was. And so I was able to see and appreciate and love you more during that
Right.
time period. Well, let's go back because obviously, like there is, and this, I think this could be relevant for a lot of people because I think this is one of the hard parts probably for our story is the fact that you didn't know for a period of time and I chose to talk to other people first.
Right.
How was that for you?
I'm going to comment on what you just said first, and then I'm going to answer your question because I think your capacity to love actually came from being loved.
Mm.
I actually think that having that love and acceptance from your best friend, and he handled it so well when you told him, I actually think when we feel loved, it really does increase our capacity to love.
Mm.
So that makes a lot of sense to me that
Yeah,
that would work
yeah,
that way.
I agree.
Hmm. And then in answer to your question, what was it like for me? So when you first told me, I mean, I am a person who loves to be confided in. Probably why I chose to be a therapist, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I really love to be that quote special person that someone's going to tell. And so I think that was really hard for me to not be quote the special person. And so initially, like, there was a lot of grappling to be done with that. There were things that were hurtful. I think one of them, there was also a fear I wasn't trustworthy. Like, I think that a big thing that I worried about was that this was about me.
Mm-hmm.
That I had done something wrong that you would not tell me this. Like if I had been more trustworthy, or if I had been more loving, if I had been more, well, less judgmental or things like that, then maybe you would have told me. And you've consistently told me that none of those things took place in your mind. And I'm still trying to believe it. It's because those are all things about me that actually were things that I've had to address. I was kind of gossipy. Like I wasn't good at keeping secrets. I am much better now that I have HIPAA, but I was not great at secrets. And I was really judgmental. Like I kind of took a moral superiority position often. And so I feel like I just have to take your word on that. I'm choosing to take your word on that, while also recognizing that it brought forward some things that I needed to look at in myself and fix if I really cared about them. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, I think what some of the listeners might be grappling with a little bit too, though, is maybe an obligation that they might feel that I had to tell you first as my spouse. Like, have you considered that? And like, how do you feel about that thought?
It's interesting because while I felt all those things, I also felt incredible gratitude for your friend and for what that did for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of held space for both of those things at the same time because I could see how much that meant to you and how important it was. Do I think you had an obligation to tell me first? I think my honest answer would be no. I just can see where most people would think it was a betrayal not to.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
I think that we are in a society that says like only our spouse should hold certain very personal information about us, right?
Or at least they have the right and you have the obligation
Yeah.
to share the most important things.
Yeah. And the
with them.
reality is our relationship grew substantially once I knew,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there is something to that, like the fact that your spouse really should be the person that you confide in, even if it's scary, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that courage is really important, and being honest is an important aspect of intimacy.
Well, and I think anything around sexuality, people think obviously between spouses, that's really where that should sit and be, right? Fully. And so I think when people probably think of me talking to someone else first, that probably does feel betrayal like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I think in life we make decisions with the best information that we have at that time. And so it's hard to get into any one person's head and see if they behaved appropriately or not. Like,
Right.
in retrospect, like had I shared with you, early on, had you been the first one, like would have it worked out okay for us? Like it might have been. It might have been a really
Right.
beautiful, wonderful experience. I think like for us at least, again, speaking just for us, because I think every situation is different. When I look back at it, I think that it was a lot easier for me to help you through the experience because I had done a lot of work on it already and I was comfortable with where I was.
Right.
And so I think that was important when I look back again in retrospect that it was really important because like I was able to step in and help you because I felt like I was on a solid foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think had I shared it with you when I originally shared it, I would have been a disaster at the time, and I definitely wouldn't have been capable of. I don't feel like I would have been capable of helping you through it as well
Mm-hmm.
in the same time period.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is, I think in life in general, if it was a mistake, good things can come from mistakes. And I'm not going to identify it as a mistake or not. I think it was the best you could do under the circumstances that you had with what you were grappling with. And so I think I've had to forgive some of that.
I would say one other note too, like if people are trying to make that decision and especially if it's a spouse trying to understand why a decision was made differently. When I went to tell my best friend, I was terrified. I was really worried that this was going to impact the relationship. And I was worried about it on a couple levels. I was worried about it simply because I didn't want to be looked at differently, right? Like I tried really hard throughout my life to make sure I showed up as a straight male, and I didn't want someone to look at me or treat me differently. And so I was scared about that. I was a little scared actually that he might also experience same-sex attraction. And I was scared there because I knew if that were the case, that we probably couldn't continue our friendship at the level it was because my desire was to stay with you and in our relationship. And I care very deeply for him. And I just think it would have been kind of scary and uncharted territory.
Too risky. I mean,
Yeah. If he had done that, it felt the same way. And so I was worried about that. But see, in the end, the thing was is the consequences of that going poorly were a lot lower than the consequences of me coming out to you going poorly. Because again, remember, I didn't want my life to change. I was very happy, being in a relationship with you, with women in general, with the kids, and like everything. I liked my life a lot and wanted to keep it that way. And so I don't remember ever seriously considering telling you first. But when I think about why it made sense for me to tell him first, where the consequences were just a lot lower.
Right.
The potential consequences. So.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that part of this growth comes from courageously facing whatever consequence there might be. Like, I think that that's what I really respected when you did tell me. So when you told me you planned a date for us, and it was like, it had been a rough week leading up to that day because I knew something was going on.
Well, and I was really struggling that week.
Yes.
Because this was really, well, first of all, I had to make the decision. And when my other buddy had kind of pushed me to talk to you, and I had decided that he was right, there's been a couple times in my life where I feel that I kind of know that it was an answer from God because it was not what I wanted to do.
Right.
Right? It's really easy for me to decide that God's giving me an answer when it lines up perfectly with what I want to do. But when I feel strongly prompted to do something that's different than what I want, like I kind of feel that that's really good evidence that that's what God wants. And so I think early on in that week, I felt like, hey, I had to do this, and I didn't want to.
Right.
Like, not at all. And so I was a mess, like all week, and you didn't understand why I was a mess.
It was crazy. I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what. And it's interesting, at the time I was in grad school, which, I mean, we can talk later about the preparation I had because I do feel like God really prepared me to hear this from you, actually. And in that time frame, so that's probably another reason why I can accept the time frame that it happened in, right? But anyway, I had just learned that week that defensiveness is often a protector of something more vulnerable. And I had always looked at you as this like really strong, capable man. You never showed any signs of vulnerability.
Because there weren't any.
And so when I learned that, and I can't remember what I asked you something. I asked you about going to therapy. I think I asked if maybe you should consider going to a therapist, and you got really defensive. I don't know if you remember.
I don't.
But internally, I was like, wait, that means there's something vulnerable. And my biggest fear that week, like, I remember doing actually a mental exercise because that week was so heavy for me. And I knew something was up. I didn't know what. And as I was imagining myself just like laying these things at the feet of the Savior, because I knew I couldn't take care of them. And as I did, the thing that I laid at his feet that relieved the most weight was just like, I might never know what this vulnerable thing is. But it was also, there was one more thing, and that was I was so worried because at that time, like one night I went to bed. I told you I was going to bed early because I was exhausted. We'd had an exhausting week. And then I woke up and you weren't home and you were with this best friend. And so another fear that I really had was that he loves his best friend more than me. like that was very present for me too.
Mm-hmm.
So as the week wound down and you told me in a very, very loving way, I kind of got off track there.
Well, but let's talk about that a little bit. Like, I
Oh,
think it might be, I don't know if you're interested in
okay.
what I went through that week, or like what was
Sure,
happening as we
sure.
think about it. But I do think it's important to think that I think these things do go a lot better if a spouse chooses to share this instead of being found out.
Right.
Now, obviously, if it's found out, everything can, I think, still be worked through and there's still hope and everything's great at that point. But I think that it is really important that if someone is willing to share this with their spouse, which I do think is a great place to be, and I think everyone should strive to get to that point, I think that they need to be really thoughtful about how they do it and the words they say, because this moment can't be redone, right?
Right.
And again, things that are sloppily done can still be fine.
Right.
Like
You
as you
can
mentioned
fix
earlier,
mistakes.
like I think that's one of the great things about repentance and the Savior in general is he can make like great things come from even poorly executed or mistakes, right? And so we should just all remember that this doesn't have to be perfect, but I do think it's important to be like just thoughtful about it when you're doing it. And although I was really struggling that week, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I wanted to do this. And so, that moment that you talked about where I was with my best friend, I was trying to figure out like
Right.
how to
Right.
best do this. And not only that, as I had talked to him, I talked to my friend that was kind of encouraging me to do this. We had met with the therapist earlier, and I called and talked to her, and she helped me script it out. I kind of told her what I wanted to do, and she was really helpful in helping me think about what things you would be worried about and concerned about, and things that I hadn't really thought about. Because although I was really nervous and scared to do it and talk to you about it, I wasn't hoping or planning on going anywhere. This was not an announcement of like, hey, I'm attracted to men and I'm going to leave. And so at some point, I probably minimized in my mind the impact that it would have on you. Because to me, this was just an
Hey,
FYI,
FYI.
like my hair's really blonde. I've been dyeing it for a really long time, but like, but I'm still me,
Right. Right.
and so my hair's not blonde, but
Well, and I think that points to some degree why you didn't feel a necessity to tell me, actually. Somehow I really do feel like you convinced yourself it wasn't necessary.
well, I think earlier when you talked about it being me being kind of protective of our relationship, like maybe that's part of what it was. I mean, I think when I opened up and talked to my best friend, it was protective in nature,
Right.
right? Like I
Yeah.
needed someone to know to kind of help me stay in line, really,
Right.
is what it was. I was like, okay, hey, listen, like I have these really strong desires and, temptations that are happening, and I don't want to give in to them. And for some reason, I knew that having someone to talk to about it
Well, an
was
accountability partner
important.
to some
Yeah.
degree, right?
And it
Yeah.
couldn't just be in the dark. And so I needed someone. And so I think it was me protecting.
Yeah.
And I think that I probably just, in the name of protection, decided that it was best not
Yeah.
to talk about. But that's obviously my personal experience. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that was how you would have had it done. Like, if you could do this again, or if you could have me do this again, are there things that you would have had me do differently?
I can honestly say no at this point, like retrospectively looking at it. I actually think it taught me the exact lessons that I needed to know. I think having to grapple with the relationship that you have currently with this best friend has been one of the best things for me. It really helped me learn how to figure out jealousy, and we will have to talk about that at another time, kind of that journey for me. I think that there were lessons that I learned about love that I couldn't have learned any other way. And through this experience, it's really taught me what love really is and how there's enough love to go around. And I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. And so, having said that, I wouldn't do it any other way. So, And I'm really grateful for them because I feel like they've made me a better person too.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, it's wonderful. I would, just note kind of in closing that I think that although we're talking about this right now in a really like
yeah.
calm and even way, I think it's important for us to note that this is a challenging journey.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of really hard conversations about this
Right.
and really emotional and difficult conversations over the years. So it's not like
Just a few.
this
A
is
few,
just
Daniel.
like a piece of cake. And I think the idea of talking about jealousy later, I think that is going to be really important because I think it was key in this experience that we talked about. But I also think that it's probably something that spouses deal with in many cases, but especially in this environment here where you have this mixed orientation marriage and the husband or
Yeah.
wife having friends of the same sex
Right.
that is socially very acceptable and expected, and all of a sudden there's this weird nuance in it that we have to figure out how to grapple with.
Yep.
So
Yep.
next time.
Yeah. We'll do that next time. I appreciate all that you're sharing. I appreciate the conversation. And I agree with you. It has not always gone like this. So early stages, it was not this pretty. Let's just put it that way.
So it's okay if it's messy.
Yeah, it is messy. And there are redos and there's learning and growth. And so in conclusion, what I'm taking away from this is that there's a lot of ways to do this. They're probably all a little messy, quite frankly. And your mess can be a way to growth. It can be a way to make you a better person. And if you take it on that way, instead of taking it on as a victim, like, what do I have to learn here? Because I think it's easy for people to see either of us as a victim in this situation. So refusing to take that position is really helpful.
Agree.
And I appreciate you all listening. You can find me at www.complexcouplescoaching.com if you're interested. This work is my passion. You can sign up for coaching waitlist so that when I'm starting that, you will be one of the first to know. And I hope you have a great week. Thanks for joining. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to that conversation with me and my husband. I just want to say one thing before signing off here, and that is, as I listen to this episode, I recognize that it's never really acknowledged that this really could be perceived as a big betrayal. And I just want to acknowledge that for me, it did feel like a betrayal in the beginning. And I think it can be really hard when what feels betraying to one person is also exactly what the other person needs. And in this circumstance, that's how it felt to me. Although it felt very betraying, it also felt like exactly what my husband needed. And part of the sacrifice that it takes in relationships sometimes is seeing the other person and seeing their difficulty and allowing space for the difficulty that it puts on you while not taking too much on. It's a really complicated thing that we're talking about here. And so it feels like I can't really do it justice in this podcast in one episode. It's part of years of learning. And quite frankly, I just don't want to minimize anyone else's experience. For some people, having a spouse share a secret with another person would be considered a serious betrayal. And I'd be lying if I said that that's not how it felt for me in the beginning. And as I have looked at that over time, I've come to realize that the betrayal is more of a betrayal of self than it is of other. And I don't think this is an exception. My husband grappling with his sexuality and revealing it out loud was extremely, extremely difficult for him. A betrayal of self was that he couldn't say these words out loud or wouldn't say them out loud to himself or to anyone else. And so it's more of a betrayal of self, which is maybe why I don't take it as personally. I'm hoping that makes sense to you. So while it may have been painful and I may have taken it as a personal affront, I later saw that this was very little to do with me and very much about him. And I chose to recognize it more or less as something necessary for his healing rather than a betrayal. But if that feels wrong to you, I get it. and you get to do this your way. So you just got to step into the way we did it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you joining me, and I hope that you will reach out if there's anything I can do. I'll see you next week.